We're going to start from the top, guys. Training too hard too often. What does this even mean? Why is training too hard too often a mistake?
So when I think of this, the thing that I think of specifically, or the way that this is most commonly manifested in people's training, is it's not so much trying to do too many high intensity sessions in a week, although that's a common problem as well. But in my mind, it's riding too hard on your endurance days. So if you have a training week planned out, you have 2 easy days, you have 5 days that are dedicated to, actual workouts. 2 of your days are high intensity maybe, and then the other 3 are endurance days. It's very common that I see people, essentially, ride whatever the allotted time is. So let's say they have a 3-hour endurance ride. They ride that, almost like as a tempo ride, which is super, super exhausting. And so then, maybe the next day they have their high intensity session and they're like, "Hey coach, I don't know why, but I'm really tired." And so you're sort of like missing the goal of the endurance session and impacting your high intensity sessions.
Yeah, and maybe maybe we can go into a little bit of why going at endurance pace on an endurance day is important. I think there's a study done by Steven Seiler and his colleagues about the stress on your autonomic nervous system and at what intensity your autonomic nervous system gets stressed. And it seems like the first ventilatory threshold, which is kind of the threshold at which you're above, if you're above the first ventilatory threshold, you're above zone 2. It seems like that is kind of a binary marker of, okay, we're over this, so we're stressing our autonomic nervous system, or we're under this, so we're not stressing our autonomic nervous system. What they found was that any intensity that riders were doing above that first ventilatory threshold, they were stressing their autonomic nervous system. So if you are doing that day after day after day and you're never giving your autonomic nervous system a break, that's the kind of thing that can lead to, staleness, burnout, overtraining, these sorts of things.
A book that I was reading once called that zone the no man's land, where you're above endurance or above that first ventilatory whatever, and then but you're not quite really like going hard enough to make any significant fitness changes. Like you're not intentionally hitting threshold or VO2. So you just end up riding in this, what they call the no man's land, on your easy days and on your hard days. So it's like not good.
Right. Well, and I think the whole thing comes down to, what an athlete's expectations are for like the post-ride sensations from endurance. I think it's important to say that, and this sort of kind of covers a couple of the topics here actually, but if you finish your endurance ride and you're totally smoked, you either paced the ride too hard or you underfueled it, or probably both. And so I think this all comes down to this idea that, in America specifically, we have this really hard work ethic. Like we think more is more. We always want to outwork our competition. And so that leads us to feeling like if we're not totally smoked after a workout, it wasn't beneficial. It's you could also be categorized as like the no pain, no gain mentality. But really, I mean, it's just because you're not smoked doesn't mean that it's not working well for you. It's not creating adaptation.
And
so
I
think that's a big mistake.
Yeah, and we should probably clarify that no pain, no gain would be correct if we're talking about a high intensity day. On a high intensity day, you do like it when we're saying don't go hard too often. We're kind of talking specifically about certain types of workouts, and then there are other types of workouts where you do need to go very hard. And actually, in order to go as hard as you need to go on those workouts, you need to take other days in the week easy in order to be able to do that.
I think one of the and this fits under this, but a big mistake I used to make personally that kind of fit under this category was not getting so focused on today's workout and not really thinking about tomorrow's workout. And so the same thing, like I would get, hyper focused on today's workout. Like I need to do today as good as possible, but you're not thinking about the consequences that has on your future training, which I think is what we're saying. Like, don't go so hard today that it compromises your future intensity days, because those are the days when we're going to be focusing on actually making gains.
Yeah, and this actually I think plays out too in like a week by week, granularity as well. So it's pretty common that I see, people go into week 1 of base, for instance, where over the course of a block, we're looking to increase volume or like time and zone over the course of that block. And in the first week, they're coming off a rest week, they're the most fresh. So they ride a little harder than they were supposed to, or a little more than they were supposed to. And then by week 3, we're not applying progressive overload because they're so tired that they end up doing less time than they did on week 1. And usually they actually, if I really think about examples of this, it's they actually still do end up getting in the volume, but the TSS on week 3 ends up being less than on week 1 because they're too tired to ride their hard days as hard as they need to. It sort of sabotages the block.
Right. Yeah, and something that I do to help mitigate this with my athletes is I almost always schedule their intensity days after hopefully a rest day, or at the very least a recovery day, like a dedicated recovery day, just to make sure that there's no if I put an endurance day in before their intensity day, like there's a good chance that they're going to override that endurance ride, and then it's going to compromise their intensity day. So I try to just have athletes do 2 full rest days a week if we can, and then 2 high intensity days. And those intensity days follow that rest day. And sometimes athletes don't like that. They get in the mindset that they have to ride the day before their intensity ride to open themselves up. But I try and just remind them that the first interval of any intensity workout is always going to be a kind of a scrapped interval anyways. It's more or less there to just open you up and get your body warmed up. So don't worry about it if you don't feel super fresh for that first interval, but hopefully by interval 3, 4, 5, you're starting to see your numbers, more steady and, the higher end of your range, and you're feeling better too. And that's usually the case.